know, that you're only concerned with operations. And by operations, you're talking, I guess, about the social amelioration program ng Office of the Vice President. Is that correct, Ms. Lopez?
That is correct, Your Honor. That is my role as Undersecretary and Chief of Staff of the Office of the Vice President.
Ms. Lopez, Attorney Lopez, I hope you understand how we would find that quite confusing, because generally the idea of a chief of staff would be second to the head of the agency, and by virtue of that, everyone else in that department would be under the chief of staff. Generally, that's how it works. Our understanding is that in the OVP, how many USEC positions are there, may we ask?
There's only one Undersecretary position, Your Honor.
And the Undersecretary position is that of the Chief of Staff, correct?
That is correct.
So generally, including the SDO, although they have specific responsibilities under the circular regarding to the confidential funds, they are still under your supervision as the USEC.
The SDOs, Your Honor, do not report to me.
They don't report to you, although you are the most senior official after the Vice President in the...
Your Honor, if I may be allowed to, Sir Congressman Gutierrez, if I may be allowed to explain my answer. In the Office of the Vice President, although I am the Undersecretary and the Chief of Staff, I am purely handling, as I mentioned, operational concerns. There are areas, for example, that I am not privy to. One of which is the matter of confidential expenses. But as regards the institutionalization of the projects, implementation of the projects, communications that come through the office, internal, issuances of memo, issuances of special orders, etc., they go through me. And also, for external communications, Your Honor, for example, there is a request for referral to for example, the DSWD or the Department of Health. All these matters, Your Honor, are coursed to the Office of the Chief of Staff, and all communications emanate also from the Office of the Chief of Staff, external, especially to those national government agencies. On top of that, Your Honor, I handle the day-to-day operations of, there is a clustering in the Office of the Vice President. For example, in the case of Director Lynn, she handles the finance cluster, which is budget, accounting, GSD, no? It's under you. The procurement. That is her AOR. On my end, Your Honor, I handle the frontline delivery of administrative support, such as Disaster Operations Center, Legal Affairs Division, and also the protocol team. Those are matters that I have direct hand into and information I am privy to. So yun lang po yung aking areas of concern. And there are areas actually in the Office of the Vice President, katulad, for example, let me just cite, if you allow me, sir, the matter of the appointments or the scheduling of the courtesy calls, etc. on the Vice President. Although it may be true that high-ranking officials call me and say na, USEC, attorney, confirm mo naman yung aming appointment with the Vice President. This is something that I have no say, direct say to, because this is all done by the appointments team. In the same manner, the protocol team of the Vice President, although all the members of the Diplomatic Corps call me as the head of the agency, as the highest official and as the Chief of Staff, it does not guarantee them that there will be a scheduled courtesy call, because these are matters that are determined purely on that end. So I think it's a compartmentalized kind of setup, Your Honor, that there are only certain functions and tasks that I am privy to. In which case, that is the one that I have mentioned earlier. But although I would wish to answer really respectfully as regards the matter of the confidential expenses, it is something that I have not really been privy to from the very beginning. So, in the case of the earlier questions by Congressman Ako, it is something that I cannot really answer because I am not privy to the disbursement, utilization, nor liquidation of the confidential funds. So, ganun po siya, Your Honor. That is how it is run in the Office of the Vice President.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Attorney Lopez. Well, I only mentioned that because it was the words of Attorney Sanchez that mentioned that you would probably be privy to the disbursement. I think it would be understandable. It would be an understandable statement on the part of Attorney Sanchez because the general understanding of a chief of staff and being the sole USEC of that agency, there would be an understanding that there would be certain that you would have overall supervision. Well, in relation to the SDOs and in line with the circular, we also understand that they have specific responsibilities only to them. But we can't help but be puzzled po, no? And I understand you're telling us now that it's compartmentalized, but still we would think that generally the head of the agency would course things through you. Although necessarily separate yung sa issue ng disbursement of the SDO, wouldn't other matters regarding the SDO, for example, administrative or human resources or logistics-wise, are they not coursed through you in relation to SDO? Because if I'm understanding it correctly, the job of the SDO would also entitle a lot of travel. As you've pointed out earlier, I mean, we've seen that maraming travel orders po ang ating SDO to the point na wala rin po siya today because of the official travel po, no? So, in relation to that, there's a lot of intermingling pa rin. Although you might say compartmentalized, there are a lot of things that would go through you. I would understand the travel orders are signed by the Assistant Chief of Staff right now only because you were gone for the longest time. But generally, you would be signing off on the travel orders of the SDO. Would that be a fair statement?
Your Honor, I do not sign off on the travel orders of certain officials, or in this case, the SDO. May I just confirm kung sino lang yung pwede kong pirmahan ng travel authority? Siya sa ODO. In my case, Your Honor, in the case of the Office of the Vice President, I can only sign off on the travels of Directors Lynn Sanchez and Director Baloro, who is the Director for Operations. All the other travel authorities, I do not sign off on them. It is HR. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, Attorney Lopez, you're telling us now that even sa pag-sign ng travel orders, may clustering pa po kayo? You are only authorized to issue travel orders for these two officials, and then everyone else has different parang boss. Ganun po ba yung system sa OVP? I hope you'd understand the confusion because we were presented before an organization and it all seemed to be like a pyramid, downstream lahat. Although there are clusters, everything's under you. But now we're seeing that there are limits to your responsibility. Are we understanding this correctly?
Your Honor, in the Office of the Vice President, we have a certain delegation of authority. There's only certain papers or documents that get into the Office of the Chief of Staff. And there are also others that go directly to the Office of Director Sanchez as well as the Office of Director for Operations.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Lopez, could you please guide us through also? Ano po yung ibang clusters? I think you mentioned financial, appointment, protocol, operations, of course, is what you're in charge of. What are the other clusters so that we have an idea? So, and in line with that, Attorney Lopez, so what you're saying now is confirming what Attorney Poa told us earlier, that if you take a deeper look into the OVP, napaka-compartmentalized. He used the same term actually. It's very compartmentalized sa OVP. So you are affirming that now po?
USEC Poa said
the compartmentalized po yung OVP. Sometimes, what the left hand does, the right hand doesn't know. Parang what Attorney Poa, while spokesperson, should be expected to know the ins and outs of the office because precisely as spokesperson, he will be relaying this information to the public. When we were asking him, he said compartmentalized po, he does not know about confidential funds. So you now, as the Chief of Staff, you are now confirming ng OVP po, despite the hierarchy that we see in the official organization chart, napaka-compartmentalized pala po yung OVP.
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor. I can only speak for my experience as the Chief of Staff. I cannot really speak for Attorney Poa because there are certain areas in the OVP that I have no information on, or I cannot really have a direct hand on how it all operates.
So, Mr. Chair, in the operation of the OVP, rather than the usual hierarchy where it's a pyramid, where you have the large base with information or data or operations, which passes information upwards to select supervisors, upwards again to director level, asset, USEC, and finally to the VP. You're telling us now that the OVP operates in a hub and spoke type of situation wherein the OVP is central and then direct na lang po siya to the different. For example, OVP direct kay spokesperson, direct kay chief of staff, direct kay Attorney Sanchez for operating different clusters. And each cluster doesn't know what the other is doing.
I can only answer, Your Honor, on my role as the Chief of Staff.
Yes, sorry, and I'll just add to that point. And I understand you can only speak as the Chief of Staff because what you're telling us now is that you have been compartmentalized only as the Chief of Staff. So now you're telling me what I'm trying to present now, and if you would agree with that, is that the VP is very hands-on but treats you separately. So there's like I said, the hub and spoke, the VP is in the center and she deals directly with Attorney POA for other matters which you might not know, then directly with you for Chief of Staff Operations for matters that only you know, directly to Attorney Sanchez for matters that only the finance would know, and you don't coordinate with each other.
There are cases, Your Honor, that is, in my experience, that is the case. For example, in the case of the spokesperson, it is not something that I am also privy to. The instructions for the OVP spokesperson. It happens, Your Honor, that way.
Thank you. I think this will be more, the compartmentalization of the OVP will be more relevant as we go on. But I'll just go back and focus on the SDOs. Thank you very much, Attorney Lopez.
Okay, thank
so
you.
Yun po, we had an idea, although Attorney Sanchez mentioned that 3 persons were involved with the SDO, it seems to be narrowed down po, no? It looks to be, like with the DepEd, it's 2 people. We have SDO, Gina Acosta, and the head of agency, which is the Vice President. So, para sa kalaman po ng lahat, yung joint circular, it dictates there that the SDO is personally tasked with the disbursement and liquidation of confidential funds. And the head of agency is personally tasked to oversee. So what Attorney Lopez has told us now, by excusing herself or by separating herself from the operations of the confidential fund, it now affirms what is in the joint circular. It is down to these 2 people. And in other words, yung SDO po yung inaatasan ng batas natin na humawak at siguraduhin mapunta ang confidential funds sa naayon na confidential expenses. So this is all in line with the circular. So since we have questions ideally for the SDO, but given that Ms. Acosta is not here, I'd like to ask these questions to Attorney Camora. Apologies, Attorney Camora, all roads lead to the COA, so I'll have to ask you in relation to the circular. So we are affirming po, we affirm po that with the joint circular, it's usually the SDO, it's only the SDO who is tasked with the disbursement of the confidential funds.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
To put more meat into this, we'd like to present po yung certification, if the Secretariat would be so kind as to flash it. The certifications for the OVP and the DepEd. Sorry, this is in relation to the certification for the confidential funds. I think we have 1 sample dated January 10, 2022. And for the DepEd, we have 1 sample dated March 31, 2023. There. So, Attorney Camora, to the Chair, most respectfully, ito po yung certification na sinasabi po natin. This is what is submitted together with the liquidation report. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And this is precisely provided under the joint circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
This is the exact language po, no? Is this an annex to the joint circular or is there a format that is provided?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's Annex B of the joint circular.
So as Annex B, even if the correct signatories are there, for example, it's signed by the SDO and signed by the head of the agency and properly notarized, if it has been altered in any way that any of the provisions under the certification are different, di niyo po tatanggapin. It has to be worded precisely as Annex B provides. Tama po ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And it would require all of these signatures,
Yes,
such as
Mr.
the head of agency. So we take note po that that means that there are very specific things that are required to be certified as to be submitted with the liquidation report. And some of the things that stand out, it says here po, and I quote, incurred by the undersigned. So ibig sabihin po rito, it is the SDO that personally handles and disperses the money.
Yes, Mr.
That is basically the crux of the certification. And it just comes with other caveats.
Yes,
Like, for example, first, what is spent is in connection with the agency's intelligence and or confidential operations and activities. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And it also says that two, it cannot be used for payment of salaries, wages, overtime, additional compensation, allowance, or other fringe benefits of officials and employees.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And third, that the expenditures are necessary and utilized for legal purposes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So this means that the SDO should personally know the disbursements and the expenses incurred, and that he should have personal knowledge of all of this. That is basically what the certification is saying.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And this hand in hand with the liquidation reports would affirm again the responsibility of the SDO to disperse the confidential fund in accordance with the provisions of the circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Since the SEO handles the fund personally, it necessarily follows that he gives the money. Is that correct? And I believe you answered this with Congresswoman Garin.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You mentioned actually that there could be possibly multiple SDOs.
They could designate many SDOs.
From all of our agencies po and departments and GOCCs that would have CIF or IF, how many po would have only one SDO?
Actually, Mr. Chair, most have only one SDO. It is the agencies that have multiple SDOs that are fewer.
Okay, so mostly have one SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And in that case, that SDO is the one in charge for them paying, and it cannot be delegated further.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, for example, if we have an informer, which is basically what the CIF is for, no? If you have an informer who needs to be paid, it is the SDO who personally pays this to them.
That is the presumption.
That is the
based
presumption.
on the certification, Mr. Chair.
And based on the requirements of the circular, it cannot be delegated. So the presumption should be reality. No?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And that is the understanding of the COA.
Yes,
That it
Mr.
is them who personally handles it. And it is them who personally receives the acknowledgement receipt.
Yes,
Is that-
Mr. Chair.
So the SDO cannot give it to another employee, for example, out of the 125 million, a specific, for example, compartmentalized daw, clustering. So ikaw sa rewards of medicine, ito, 20 million. And then siya na po yung in charge sa, and then whatever ARs that delegated person would receive would pass it on to the SDO. That is not allowed under the circular.
Even if he or she does that, he or she is the one ultimately accountable for those funds based on his or her certification. So, it's under his responsibility pa rin po.
Yes, so basically command responsibility siya pa rin. But if that
Yes.
were the case, that is not in line with the circular because it should be personally dispersed by
Yes,
the SDO.
Mr. Chair.
So we can't be too sure that the SDO, if it were the case that it were delegated, the SDO would not be able to certify it in such a manner. Because
Yes,
supposedly it's saying there that he's the one who actually dispersed the money.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And this is the same for payments of rewards. This is not just for the handling of funds in general. Even for
Yes,
payments of rewards and information, it goes the same way.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
The SDO gives payment directly to the recipient, and the recipient is supposed to give the AR or any DEPs that are in relation to that. Ms. Camora, Attorney Camora, so these acknowledgement receipts were submitted by the OVP and the DepEd to COA. This is the proof, this is the documentary evidence of payment that is required by the circular. And now we have that understanding that you confirmed now that the SDO personally handles the same. So they handle the funds and they handle personally the DEPs.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So if there's any doubt to the confidential funds, if there's any doubt at all to the DEPs, any doubts to the ARs, which have been hammered down in the last hearing and now in this hearing, this all points down to the SDO. This is their personal responsibility under the joint circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, for example, one of the things that we pointed out last time in relation to the dates, if there is any problem with the date of the AR, it should have passed to the SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Because unlike, for example, in our usual po natin na Atty.camora, let's say, in a usual transaction, pumunta ka sa mall, bumili ka ng pagkain, magbibigay ng resibo, you wouldn't pay a second thought of that OR because usually you don't have to liquidate it anywhere, just a piece of paper. But as an SDO, in which you have a personal responsibility, nakataya pera mo pa rin kasi nakaband ka po to the treasury.
Yes, Mr.
So you would have to check and make sure that all of the ARs are accurate.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Including the date.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Since one of the responsibilities under the Joint Circular is to disburse the CF and IF in accordance with the provisions of the circular.
Yes. So in the circular, it requires an acknowledgement receipt, and an acknowledgement receipt would require the date. So the date having been filled in for the AR and received by the SDO has the responsibility to make sure that it is correct.
Yes, Mr. Chair, although the requirement is documentary evidence.
Documentary evidence. So I'm sorry, but yes, the AR as the DEP
Yes,
would be required to have gone under scrutiny of the SDO. So if we had 158 ARs which have a supposed typographical error, shouldn't the SDO have caught on since they personally gave the money and received the receipt? He would check the receipt. Kung tama yung pangalan, may signature, tama yung purpose, and the date. So the 158 times na mali yung date, supposedly 158 times ang dumaan po ito sa SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So with that, we'd like to ask the COA. I know we've asked this before already, but we're looking into the responsibility of the COA. We've already mentioned many times that the ICFA would only be concerned with the submission of the DEPs. And that you wouldn't look no further because generally parang ministerial na lang to a point. But should it have raised some red flags po? Especially now in hindsight, yung 158 with typographical errors ng dates.
Because of our hearings here, we're kind of looking into this, that we should be a little stricter on our audit from now on. So
we understand po, no, you mentioned before that one of the limitations of your office is manpower. And I think
yes,
one
Mr.
thing that the committee will be working on in aid of legislation is to strengthen po the COA, that you would have the proper manpower support to make sure that this does not happen again. I think that's one thing personally this representation would like to push forward for the consideration of the committee. But with that said, so I hope now the ICFA would take into special consideration not only the impossibility of typographical errors, the frequency of it occurring, the time span in which it happens. And of course now, as mentioned by Congressman Adjong, we've seen earlier that there are problems even to the multiple names with different signatures. This should have raised a red flag. And of course, the bogus names that were raised by Congressman Acop, such as Mary Grace Piatos. So these are things that I hope that the ICFA would be more stringent with. But there's one more matter, aside from that, which we have brought up from the previous hearing, that I hope that you could consider. Upon studying po yung DEPs natin, and we already know that there's a question about the time span in which that it was dispersed. Alam natin, questionable yung 11 days, na 5 days pa nga po ay holiday, dispersed po ito lahat. But one more thing we have to consider, now that you have affirmed to us, now that we understand it better, na yung SDO is personally in charge of dispersing the funds, we collated po yung ating mga DEPs, and we've seen po, for example, this is, I think, the DepEd. So this would be by Mr. Fajardo. For the, I believe this is the first quarter of 2023, submitted on the 31st of March, there were disbursements every day po, no? Since the release of the cash. And that disbursements, they would not go less than 10 times a day po. If you could see po in the chart, this is what we've seen. You would notice that the ARs, it would say the address or location. This is one thing particularly with the DepEd. Aside from the name, the signature, the date, meron pong locations. So, on February 21, 2023, or the very next day after the SDO encashed the 37.5 million in checks, lumabas po sa acknowledgement receipts that SDO Fajardo made 7 disbursements already. This is the day after, in 7 different locations. And the locations are Malolos, Davao, San Francisco, Agusan del Sur, Makati City, Negros Oriental, Negros Occidental, and Davao City. So the very next day, after, I would assume, the check was issued, it was encashed in Land Bank under the Shaw branch. Tama po ba for DepEd? Or
DepEd branch.
The DepEd branch. So the DepEd branch, that is in what city po here in NCR?
Pasig, sir.
In Pasig po na encash. and immediately the next day, he traveled to these 7 places and had these 7 ARs. Did this not raise a red flag of the impossibility of this occurring?
Well, it does, sir. Although during our review, somehow we just accepted the acknowledgement receipt.
For reasons you've already stated earlier, po,
Yes,
Atty.camora. In addition to this, if you go to the day of the first quarter that had the most disbursements, which is March 15, 2023, SDO Fajardo supposedly made 26 disbursements in the following locations: Davao del Sur, Surigao del Sur, Oriental Mindoro, Laguna, Zamboanga del Sur, Cebu, Ifugao, Antique, Batanes, Pampanga, Legazpi, Lanao del Norte, Batangas, Tarlac, Metro Manila, Samar, Davao de Oro, Agusan del Norte, Davao del Sur, Davao de Oro, Laguna, Cavite, Surigao del Norte. Atty.Camora, let's give him a helicopter. I don't think he'll do that in one day. So it really raises a question. How did SDO Fajardo certify and say that he personally disbursed this? Buti na lang po yung DepEd ARs have location. So it really shows us kung saan po sila. Unlike the DepEd ARs, yung OVP po wala. Yung OVP would only have the name, the purpose, the name, the signature, and the date. That's it. And the amount. But here we can see in DepEd, it seems to be really impossibility. So you could see the theme, not really the theme po, but what we're driving at here. Earlier, according to Congresswoman Garin, and I understand the frustration, there is the physical impossibility of the delivery and encashment of the cash. The questions regarding that, surrounding where it was brought. And then now, even the physical impossibility of the disbursement. Yun naman po yung tanong dito. If truly SDO certifies that he or she is the only person and has personal knowledge of disbursement, has personal knowledge, has gone through the DEPs, how do we explain this? It looks like from north to south, tip to tip po itong Pilipinas. By Batanes pa rin po. So these are just some of the questions that we have. And if we look at the chart earlier, it happens multiple times. For February 25, there were 21 disbursements across 18 different localities. February 27, 21 disbursements across 18 localities. March 3, and the list goes on. And if you notice the chart, every day po yun. Every day po may disbursement. So it really raises the question po, no?
Yes, Mr.
About the
Chair.
legal, the veracity of the certification. We were now seeing the consequences of our current format that we have, that a simple signature, which the COA just blindly, not to fault you, again, we understand the reasons that you have, that you lack manpower and all that. But napakahirap po to because we're talking about the most difficult to account for, confidential intelligence funds po, no? So, if I may continue, Atty.Camora, and again, I understand frustration. I wanted to ask this to the SDO personally. I think they would have been able to answer. But on the light side na lang po, to make the most of the information that we have, at least on the side of the COA, that you'd understand the frustration of this committee, and that you'd understand po where we'd want to proceed with this. It goes the same with the OVP. If I may continue, Mr. Chair, the pattern of the OVP is that even if it doesn't have the locality or the address, the disbursements are really dubious and curious because it really makes use of these disbursements in a way that you would find hard to believe. Just the number of disbursements given number of days, it really raises some questions po, no? Like for example, on December 23rd of December 2022, this is close as in relation to what Congressman Acop mentioned. There were a lot of holidays in those 11 days. And in fact, Noche Buena would have been the number one thing that people would be preparing for. But on the eve of Christmas, or the day before, when you'd be preparing for the eve of Christmas, on December 23, at least 103 individuals received a total amount of 15 million pesos. I mean, just 15 million pesos for 103 individuals. If truly the SDO is certifying that personally she, I think this is SDO Acosta, she dispersed this, it really raises the question kung the possibility po, no, how they did this. So, and this would include a bunch of things. No? It's very much payment of reward, payment of information, medicine, the safe houses were also included there. Given the various clusterings, if you would call it that, parang it leads to the, I would not say impossibility, the improbability of the AR submitted. So I think we really need a strict scrutiny po, no, of the DEPs that are being submitted. I'd just like to point out that based on this study, the days where the OVP gave confidential funds, over 100 recipients, all happened in 2022. And this is the time that had the 11-day period. So you could see na, I don't know if it's intentional, pero minadali po talaga. There was really quick disbursement. And in line with that, just one last question, Attorney Camora, and which was brought up by Congressman Ako. He was driving the point with Attorney Sanchez that you could obligate the confidential funds. If you don't consume, for example, because this is cash advance system, you advanced 125 for December of 2022, and you only consume, for example, 100 million. Does that mean mawawala na po yung 25 million, or does it carry on to the next quarters? Sorry, let's not do 2022 kasi last month na yun. Let's say for yung GAA provided na CIF. If in the first quarter of 125 million, na consume lang po is or what's justified is 100 million, what is the effect for the second quarter? Can they disburse 150 million, or are they limited still to the quarterly limit of 125?
Mr. Chair, the cash advances for the whole year. So as long as the cash advances are within the year and the last cash advance was liquidated, they could cash advance again for the next like quarter or the next quarter, since most of them do it quarterly.
So for example, on the 31st of March, I've consumed 100 and I justify with a liquidation report of 100 million. I still need to justify the 25 left, even beyond March 31. That would be allowed for the first quarter?
Can you repeat?
Sorry. So yung first quarter po, meron tayong cash advance of
Yes,
125 million. Ang nakonsumo lang po ng opisina ay 100 million lamang. May 25 million po na balance. Does that mean I can still justify the 25 million after March 31?
No, Mr. Chair. If it has been cash advanced for that period and the amount that was unutilized should be returned by the SDO.
It should be returned to the SDO.
Yes,
Yung
Mr.
sinasabi po ni
Since yung
Congressman
liquidation
Ako,
po is yung buong amount po dapat.
but it could be obligated in that time. It doesn't have to be dispersed. You could obligate for the 25 million. Kaya hindi naman return. I believe that was the point that Congressman Ako was making.
Pwede naman po
Pwede.
yan. As long as it is still within the year of the it's still within the year, so yung cash advance is still for the year.
Thank you, Attorney Camora. So yun lang po, just to manifest, it really drives the point that it seems to be there are questions po with the timing and the accompanying DEPs, and I'm sure that we're still going to go back to this. There were other questions, but unfortunately, wala po yung ating SDO, so I'll have to hold on to that. Mr. Chair, with that, I'd yield to other interpellators. Maraming salamat po.